I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that, well, J.J. Abrams saved the Star Trek franchise. Now, I know a lot of die-hard purist Trekkies are gonna want to fillet me for that, but it's true. He took what was essentially a 1960s science fiction television series that only lasted 3 seasons and found a way to make it appealing to mainstream audiences and giving it the facelift it needed. Because I know a lot of people are just like, oh, why couldn't he keep the canon? Well, not everybody has seen all the episodes of Star Trek. If you're wanting to make something appealing to the mainstream audience shouldn't have to do homework. I mean, if you've read my article about why films based on books need to differ from the source material, I brought up the same thing. It's not for the die-hard fans, it's for the mainstream audience. Point being, the film was successful enough to warrant a sequel, and apparently there's a third one in development, but given that J.J. Abrams is being pulled everywhere and kind of being stretched thin, we don't know where things could go from there. Yes, I know he's the director announced for Episode 7. I don't live under a rock, I know that stuff, but this is a Star Trek review, and so the topic is going to stay focused on the film in question. With that said, let's get started with this week's episode of Romney's Reviews. Now, the first thing I noticed was that the film manages to keep that nice, fast pace and tension that made the previous film so engaging and enjoyable. It managed to actually keep things moving. It does the whole in medias res with that mission on that weird planet with all the red stuff, but it basically has that nice tension, that nice pace to it that actually gets you involved in the action. On top of that, it also outdoes itself because some of the set designs and iconic imagery from the Star Trek films gets given that nice, grittier and more realistic edge, while still keeping itself fairly recognizable. I mean, for example, visually speaking, the exterior and interior of the Enterprise acts as a nice counterpoint to the stuff they encounter, such as when they enter the Klingon homeworld, as well as some of the other ships you see in the film that are a lot darker and more brooding. It creates a nice visual contrast that keeps things easy to follow visually. On that same note, a lot of the iconic and more recognizable aspects of the Star Trek universe that are introduced in this film are introduced in a way that doesn't call attention to itself, because it's really stupid when people make films based on famous franchises and they feel the need to call attention to iconic imagery. It was the same problem I had with the Evil Dead remake. In addition to that, the film also tries to make a sort of thematic connection with another Star Trek movie sequel, Wrath of Khan. By that I mean it replays, well, not so much replays, but retreads and kind of copies certain scenes and aspects from that film. However, that also kind of works against it. Point being is that some of the stuff that's supposed to make the connection feels really shoehorned in. It feels really unnecessary. So if they weren't trying to make that connection to Wrath of Khan, they could have taken those aspects out and made the film flow a lot better, as well as rectify some of the weird screenplay stuff that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Now, I can't go into too much detail about what bothered me about this without giving spoilers, and you know my policy about keeping things spoiler-free, so here's another spoiler alert rant. Click on the annotation, it'll take you to the video, so if you've seen the movie or don't care about spoilers and want to know what bothered me the most, just click there, it'll take you to the unlisted video, same as the Evil Dead review. Now, the weird stuff with the connections aside, the film does get a little bit goofy towards the end. I mean, I literally found myself laughing during the action scenes because some of the over-the-top grunts and screams, especially when you've got some stuff that people may recognize in the fight scenes, and you just get this really over-the-top reaction from Benedict Cumberbatch. Good actor, by the way, but it's just a case when you hear like the you're just like, I just started laughing. I mean, I kept it under control because I'm not, well, a jerk, so, but it was still just a case that it kind of broke the suspension of disbelief from time to time with some of the more over-the-top stuff towards the end of the film. Speaking of which, the film also, well, there's no other way to put this, but it suffers from what I like to call the Frieza saga fake-out, where you think the villain's defeated, only to realize that there's still more movie to go. For those of you who've seen Dragon Ball Z, you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say a Frieza saga fake-out. Now, those flaws aside, the acting in this film is really good, especially with Benedict Cumberbatch kind of, just with his sheer presence and delivery, almost steals the scenes that he's in. Now, granted, the other actors that are brought in do a really good job, especially with John Cho somehow making himself pretty intimidating when he's given temporary control of the ship. John Cho is the person who plays Sulu, and so it's just a case that the acting in this film is really good, even when you get to some of the over-the-top moments, it still, at least is, the acting is still good enough that it doesn't break it completely, but it still kind of distracts. So overall, I found this film to be really enjoyable. It's a nice way to kick off the summer movie season. However, it does have a few flaws with it. Although it didn't really detract or, well, distract from the experience to a very painful degree, they were still kind of noticeable, particularly with the over-the-top moments and some of the fake-outs in the third act, as well as some of the stuff in the script that, when I thought about it, didn't really make a lot of sense or weren't really explained or clarified very well within the film. Because of that, I'm going to be giving Star Trek Into Darkness a 4 out of 5. 4 out of 5 because it was enjoyable, but it has its flaws. On a final note, I recommend watching this film in 2D as opposed to 3D, not just because of the cheapskate in me, but also because the fact that the film was shot in 2D originally on IMAX cameras, and it was a post-production conversion to 3D. So sometimes, although there are some films that do a good job of that nowadays, it's probably better to watch it in 2D because that's how it was originally shot. So that's it for this week's episode of Romney's Reviews. I'm gonna be taking a bit of a break next week because I've got some college stuff that I have to take care of that's really making my life a bit of a living hell right now. So yeah, I'll be taking a break next week, possibly the week after, although the paper is starting up soon again, so yeah. I'll see you all next time.